Welcome to Paper and Moose. Today's episode is all about ephemera, but not just any ephemera. Letters from World War II, written between the time period of February and June 1944. Now, if you are a World War II buff, you know that there's one day in particular in that span of months that stands out amongst the rest. What was it? Stay tuned to find out as I read these letters and I talk about some of the history behind the writers. A few months ago, I received a letter in the mail from David, who stated that he was going through some photographs that he had purchased, and he actually came across this bundle of letters. So he thought he would send them to me and test my research skills. Well, I was up to the test. When I first started looking through the letters, as usual, I'm like, okay, here are the names, here are the dates. Let me go on Ancestry.com and try and, get as much information I can about the people. But then I came across two letters in particular that I thought were just so well written, so genuine, and just, a snapshot of time during World War II that I kind of wanted to just read the letters and let them speak for themselves. So I stopped myself from going down a large rabbit hole, as I usually do when I do my research. And I just try to focus on the letters, especially one. I couldn't resist though, and I did do a little bit of research, which will be at the end after I read the letters. There are some scans so that you'll actually be able to see the letters, and then also just some pieces of history that I threw in there as well that I thought would be interesting. So the letters. David, my one of the viewers that sent me this mail, as I said, he found these letters amongst some photographs, and so he thought he would send them to me. They were all written to a John Davenport, who was in the Navy. They're from a variety of writers. Two are from one person, which I think after hearing his writing and just how genuine he was, I want to meet him. Of course, I'm sure he probably passed away, but those were the letters that touched me the most. But there's one from a chaplain, one from a Shirley, and then just a variety of others. But I thought I would just focus on a couple. Now, letters in World War II or from World War II, they are collectible for a variety of reasons. For the content, obviously. You have this world war going on, and all of our boys are overseas. You have a lot of our people back home, including women, working in the factories, so that U.S. could pump out what was needed for overseas. So there's a lot going on, and letters at that time, they were pretty much the main source of knowledge and of keeping in contact. Unlike today, you can go on Skype, you can go on FaceTime on your phone. Back then, you couldn't do that. So letters were, they were important, and you can tell that in the letters and in the letter writing. So they're collectible for that reason. They're collectible also because, how many are left? What was thrown out? Most times you only have one part of the puzzle. You have the letters that someone received. It's very rare, maybe not so rare, but kind of rare that you have both parties. So the ones that were writing back and forth. So you just kind of got to piece the puzzle together. But before I keep digressing, let's get to it. So these letters, again, were written to a John Davenport who was from Massachusetts. I believe the town is Hingham, Massachusetts. The first letter that I'm going to read is this little small one. It came with a church bulletin, which I will show in the end in the slide deck, and then just this little card. So what I did beforehand, so I could decipher the handwriting, I typed everything out. So the small letter is dated February 17th in 1944. On this day during the war, the American Marines landed at, excuse my butchering of this word, Eniwetok in the Marshall Islands. The capture of Eniwetok would provide an airfield and harbor to support the attacks on Mariana Island. So that was written, that's what happened on this day that this letter was written. And the letter states, Hello, John. I have no doubt you have been receiving a few of our church calendars every week, which this is the program. No, this is the calendar. So inside it just has, the morning worship events, the church notes, and then on the back it actually lists all the men from their congregation that were involved at that time in the war. I had your name amongst my slips we give out every Sunday and thought I would send along this greeting card and the enclosed calendar. Hope things are going nicely with you. I'm sure you will be glad when this is over and on your way home. Regards from all of us, Mrs. Hornstra. So, as many did, and actually many places, including churches, still do with, Operation Iraqi Freedom, they gave out addresses of soldiers so people could write to them, and that's what she did. So a nice little letter. The next one, it's the mail. Again, I include this at the end. You can see the nice inside. This is dated or written April 26th, 1944, and it came from Chaplain E.T. Anthony of the 16th AA Battalion, the 5th Amphibious Corps. So on this day of World War II, the Allied Naval Command Expeditionary Force staff moved to battle headquarters for D-Day at Southwick House, Hampshire, England. So they're starting to make the move towards getting everything ready for D-Day, and that's important to remember. So Edwin writes, Dear Jack, I was mighty glad to hear from you again. Yes, I did get a letter from you a while back, but lost the address before having a chance to reply. What a lot of experiences you must have had already, and what a lot of fun you're going to have after this is all over, swapping yarns. I see by the church calendar that Kenny is in the Army. Do you know where? Your news about getting married is sure exciting. Congratulations and best wishes. I only wish I was around to have the privilege of tying the knot. There's not very much news about myself which I can give, except that I'm well and happy and very busy. You will notice a little change in my address too, although a letter to the old address will still reach me. Best of luck, Jack, wherever you go. Regards to Billy, who was Jack's fiance. Cheerio, Edwin. I love his phrase, swapping yarns. And then just even the way that they ended their letters. Cheerio, regards. I love those. So this was interesting. I tried to look up a little bit more about this chaplain, but I wasn't able to find much without letting myself, spend hours and hours, but maybe in the future. So the next two letters are the letters that really touched me, and I hope that you enjoy them as much as I did. So the first is dated April 27th, 1944. And this is the envelope. And this is from a man in Melbourne, Australia. And on this day, April 27th, 1944, the British authorities banned all travel outside the country in an effort to put a stop to intelligence leaks about the invasion. So to stop any knowledge going to, the Germans about D-Day. Dear Jack, it is quite some time now since I wrote to you or received a note from yourself. Quite a lot has happened to me since I last told you I had visited Brisbane in my letter, Well, shortly afterwards, I went home on 1 month's leave. I was very lucky to get it so soon after joining the ship. Now, I forgot to mention, when they're writing John or Jack, he is in San Francisco, California, just so you know. Back to the letter. However, time does not stand still, and in no time my leave had expired, and back on board I was again, still at Brisbane. About 2 weeks later, I was drafted from my ship into the Brisbane Naval Depot, where I stayed for 3 weeks, after which time I was told I was to be ready to take the train for Melbourne the next day. No need to ask if I was ready, Jack, and soon Queensland was slipping away from view and New South Wales taking its place. But I was not interested much in the latter, but when, after changing trains in Sydney, I was crossing the border into my own state, Victoria, I was very joyous. Well, the folks were sure glad to see me again. They had not expected to see me so soon after my recent leave. I guess the neighbors must have thought I was doing a bit of wise pulling or something. But what I came home for was to be discharged from the service. You see, both my mother and father are invalids, and not being content with that, God has stricken down my father with some internal trouble and is now in one of our big Melbourne hospitals. So you see, I am being discharged on compassionate grounds. I have been at home doing the housework and looking after Mum, as one can't get help these days, as everyone is in munitions or earning high wages. I suppose one can't blame them, really. But I have my discharge now, and I'm just waiting for the certificate, which is being posted to me. And when I get it, I'm going to take it to my former employer, the Meyer Emporium in the city, and show it to the staff manager. The Meyer Emporium is the largest store in the Southern Hemisphere. It's really huge. The staff in peacetime numbered over 8,000. Am I going to put on the glad rags when my deferred pay is sent to me? At present, I've got my eye on a camel hair coat. I like good clothes, but then, I suppose everyone does. By the way, Jack, note my home address at the top of page 1. How are things going with you? You know, I think your time is nearly up. As you know, Australia is floating a loan for 150,000 pounds then, called the First Victory Loan, and it is practically filled. Don't you think that 7 million people are doing a good job, Jack? Yesterday there was a big all-Australian radio drive for the loan. When people were asked to phone and promise to lend so much money, get the idea? Well, for the 10 hours of the broadcast, 1.5 million was promised. 600,000 coming from my own state, which, by the way, contributed the greatest amount. The weather at the present time is typical of winter in Melbourne. Cold winds and rain, and as a result, a cold is hovering above my head, just waiting to get a good grasp on me. But I am doing my best to combat it. As you see, I sing a little, and a cold is no asset for that occupation, is it? Did you get the parcel of magazines I sent you, Jack? I hope you did. I won't send any more until I hear that you are getting my letters okay. Well, Jack, Mum is singing out for something, so I will have to go, but before closing, I sincerely hope my letter finds you in the best of health, and also hoping to hear from you in the near future. Your pal and good friend, Gerald Jerry. I love his writing. I love the flow of his writing. I love his sentences. He just seems like a really great writer and a genuine person. And there's some really interesting facts that he included in his letter about what was going on in Australia during that time, during World War II. First, you have the reason why he was discharged, to take care of his parents. And while he sounds somewhat relieved to have been discharged, I think there is just a little bit of remorse for not still being, with his fellow servicemen, serving for his country. He's helping out his parents. And even the way that he wrote, not being content with that, God has stricken down my father. Like, just great writing. And then he talks about the aid that Australia was having to get a loan to help pay for things, about the emporium that he worked at, which I would love to research that more. I've included that in the presentation at the end as well. But let's get to the final letter. This letter, just because of the date that it was written, is wonderful in of itself. This letter is dated June 6th, 1944, and it was posted June 7th, and then it was received on June 14th. But June 6th, 1944 is D-Day. That was D-Day, when the shores of Normandy were invaded. Dear Jack, well, a few weeks have elapsed since I received your first V-mail letter, but as time just slips by so quickly these days, hope you will excuse me. I had never seen a V-mail letter before, and it was quite a novelty. Excuse writing, as I am sitting in an armchair by the fireside, and it is rather awkward. By the way, both pages arrived together. Don't tell me you have been sick again. You certainly are a beaut. And you certainly have the love bug concerning Billy, haven't you? Again, that would be John's wife. Oh well, I suppose it had to get to you sooner or later. I hope she is well for your sake, as you care for her so much. I hope it won't be long before we are together once more. I just posted a letter to you a couple days before getting your last. Hope you received it safely. I just changed pens. I guess you noticed the difference. Well, life these days is different from life on an ocean wave, and I can't say I don't prefer the city life. As I told you before, I am employed at the largest store in Melbourne, Mayors, which sells anything from a hammer to a house full of furniture. I myself am connected with the perfumery section. While writing this letter, I am munching lovely sweets of all sorts. I bet you're dying for something of the like. If you would like anything in the nature of eatables or edibles sent to you, please write and tell me, because I will be only too glad to give them to you. So don't forget or feel embarrassed by it. We had big war news today, all over the world, about the capture of Rome and the invasion of France by the Allies. The ball is certainly rolling now, and we have the damn Japs to fix as well. Melbourne weather this time of year is very chilly, as winter is upon us, and to be by the fire is the best place, and it takes a lot to tempt me to go out to a show in the evening. How is the weather where you are now? Is it pleasant as when I was there? You must be tired of your surroundings by now, but as I have said before, it must be time for your transfer. Perhaps you have left already. And he is still in San Francisco with the Navy. Well, time is drawing on, and the news scarce a present, I will reluctantly close, hoping that my letter finds you in the best of health and trusting to hear from you again soon. P.S. Do you get regular mail from your home folk? I hope so, as I know you look forward to letters. Your sincere pal, Jerry. So again, you have just wonderful writing and thought patterns, but then you have 2 sentences about D-Day. And I think that sets the whole tone of a letter. You have this man that was discharged from the Australian Army. He's home, taking care of his parents, working at the largest emporium in Australia, and he notes that big war news all over the world about the capture of Rome and the invasion of France. And you can just picture him sitting in a chair, in an armchair by the fire, and writing this letter as all this is going on around him in the world. And that is one of the reasons that I love ephemera. It's nice to look at. It has a certain, air about it with the writing and everything, but it's the content. It's the history behind it. It's the stories behind the people's lives. And, this is a real treasure to have this letter. Even the 2 sentences that reference one of the biggest events in World War II. So Dave, thank you again for sending these to me. It was really a pleasure to be able to read this and get to know Jerry. I did some researching on John or Jack. I still have more to do, but again, I just wanted the letters to speak for themselves in an essence, because this Jerry, he was a good writer, a very good writer. So stay tuned. Again, I have some photographs of the letters so you can see more of how they're written, and then some other pieces of historical information that I thought was pretty neat that you would like to see, including a helmet that the Emporium sold after the war, which is pretty cool. So stay tuned for that. But onward to more ephemera and to more research and to more learning about the past and just the lives of people that have gone before us. So stay tuned for the slideshow. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed this History Behind the Paper episode.